This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, and welcome once again to The Clash. That's the show where we take our Christian worldview and allow it to clash into the culture around us. I'm Jeff Dixon, and I'm joined by Chris Whaley.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Man, better than I deserve. I tell you, if I got what I deserved, I'd probably be taken out and shot at sunrise. I'm just so glad that I don't get what I deserve.
That's good. Yeah, we won't, and we wouldn't put that on TV anyway.
No.
But in this episode, we're going to talk about a topic that seems kind of silly, but there's a serious edge to it. And the topic is it okay for Christians to have fun?
Yeah.
And as a side note, what's up with those Christian superstitions?
Oh, yeah. We got a lot of them.
Well, I'm sure that none of our audience does. So this really is a conversation just for you and I to have.
No, they're high-rate audience. So
They are
no,
indeed.
they wouldn't have that.
But I mean, I think that it is, this for me, as a kid growing up, this is the question that was burning in every back row Baptist mind.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to have fun?
Yeah.
And sometimes church didn't make Christianity sound like it was that much fun.
No, before I became a Christian, it felt like to be a Christian, everything that you want to do, it has to be wrong.
Yeah.
And the things that you didn't want to do seemed to be right in the Christian circles back in those days. I don't know. Did you feel that way?
Well, yeah. I mean, I always heard the stereotypical, and again, not blatantly stated, but no laughing, no dancing. Nothing that people would think was just fun that you would default to fun. Okay, that's not of God. Yeah. I worked for the pastor one time that used to tell me things weren't of God all the time when I was having fun.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy. I just laughed and went on because by then I didn't care. But I used to hear that a lot, and there's always a struggle though because again, I think the thing that we've miscommunicated sometimes in church is that anything that is fun is sin.
Yeah.
And it's not.
It just didn't look like they were having fun at all.
No.
I mean, a famous Christian comedian used to say it looked like they were getting over a hookworm treatment on Sunday morning. When you looked out there, and Jeff, even when I became a Christian, I felt the call into the ministry, and then early on, you get those phone calls. Hey, could you preach for me on Sunday? And you get so excited, and you go. I'm sure you had those opportunities, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was scary. It was scary to stand up there and look out the congregation and have somebody sitting there just to say, well, bless me if you can, It was scary, and I got a great sense of humor, I believe it or not, Jeff. I do. I love to laugh, love to have fun, and I thought, man, I'm just in the wrong group of people because nobody wants to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm convinced that church and church people should be the most fun and exciting people on the planet.
Absolutely.
And that the church should be the place where you can have fun and do it in a wholesome way. And I think it honors God.
Yeah.
I think Steve Brown from Key Life Ministries uses that phrase where, laughter is the sound of heaven.
Right.
And I think that there's going to be a lot of people when they get to heaven that if they don't learn to laugh now, they got some catching up to do. Yeah. Because I think we're going to have a lot of joy and a lot of laughter, and that is going to be the soundtrack of heaven.
Yeah. You remember Grady Nutt?
I do remember Grady Nutt.
Grady Nutt used to say that laughter is the suntan lotion on the sunburns of life.
No doubt about it. I mean, they called him the Prime Minister of Humor, right?
Because he was on Hee Haw.
Yeah.
He was like that's when I had a kind of an awakening, Jeff.
Okay.
I was in college.
So Hee Haw revolutionized your life?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to go back.
I was just making sure.
I'm going back before Hee Haw.
Okay.
I was in college, Palm Beach Atlantic, and we had our spring banquet. and they had a speaker for that spring banquet, and his name was Grady Nutt. He was a friend of Dr. Jess Moody's. And I never heard of Grady Nutt. And I went to the spring banquet, and I have never laughed so hard in all of my life, and it was like an awakening. It is okay for Christians to laugh. This guy, he was so funny. And I mean, at one time I thought, well, that's my calling. I need to be a Christian comedian, but you know, I was too boring. That didn't work out.
That didn't work?
Didn't work.
Okay.
It didn't work out.
You stood up and everybody left?
No, they laugh a lot when but it's just, it's not like Grady Nutt.
Sure.
Not like Grady.
Oh, he was great.
Jerry Clower, you know, he was very dedicated Christian Southern Baptist.
Yep.
From, you know, he would be gone all week, but he wanted to make sure that he was home on Sunday, and he was sitting on the front row at church every Sunday.
A commitment to the church. Good plan.
Any other Christian comedians you know?
You know, they're out there, and you know they kind of fade in. We live in a YouTube world now, so it's a lot easier to find.
Michael Jr. Michael, you never heard Michael Jr.? He's the African American Christian comedian. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's hilarious, man. You need to look at him. Yeah. I think that the one time where I snorted when I was, you know, it's terrible when you're laughing and you snort. Mm-hmm. I snorted during Michael Jr.
The one I would recommend today that really is just funny and just wildly irreverent, but great is Tim Hawkins.
Tim Hawkins, colonoscopy.
Yes, he is. He is because he sings. Yeah, he pokes fun at everything that church people hold to be sacred, and just has the amazing way of making a face and just doing what needs to be done. I mean, he probably, at least in my estimation, is the guy who's kind of raised the standard in some way for Christian comedians today. Yeah.
Mark Lowry?
Mark Lowry, always funny. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
So they're out there. They're out there.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know why we lost this idea that we're not allowed to have fun, because if you go back, Jesus' first miracle that's recorded in Scripture. Yeah. It was a wedding feast, a wedding celebration.
Right.
He turned water into wine, but for him then he people invited him. They wanted him and the disciples to be there. And I think that there's a unwritten portion of that basically says the invitation came because people liked being around him. He was fun to be around. I have a feeling that with Jesus at the table, there was always a story. There was always a quick, a quick saying or something that would catch a laugh, and that he made it fun.
And he loved children too.
Sure,
he loved children. And you can't be around kids and not have humor and laugh. I don't know. I got several stories, Jeff. And I don't know if I've told them because I've had too many concussions. But when I was in my second church, I used to do a children's sermon. Right. You'd sit on the steps and all the kids would gather around you. Oh, I had some hilarious things.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's a parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
When the kids come up for a children's sermon, parents hate that because they're what's my kid going to say? Don't give him a microphone.
Yeah. And that kid always wanted to sit right beside me.
Sure. He's the closest one, so he can get to the microphone.
Yeah. And I have the wireless right here, and he would just kind of lean in. We'd just sit down. Hey, boys and girls, good to see you. And he'd lean in. My mom and dad were fighting this morning. She's sitting behind me in the choir. It's like, oh.
She's the lady who turns 50 Shades of Red, yeah.
Yeah. You never had those episodes.
No. That's why I steer away from children's sermons. I stay away from those. I also, though, and I think one of the lost connect points for followers is that Ecclesiastes reminds us that there's a time, a season for everything. Yeah. Included in that list, a time to dance, a time to laugh.
Right.
And I think that somehow we've lost the ability to laugh and have fun. And yet, as a follower, we have every reason, the only reason, to have joy and have a better outlook on life that really does give us a lens so we can look at things with a sense of humor. I think God has a great sense of humor.
And, Jeff, I don't mean to, blow our own horn here, but there's not a lot of Christian TV shows like ours because we have humor on our show just about every week, don't you think?
Well, I mean, we entertain ourselves. So I guess it must mean something. I'm not sure anybody else likes it, but we're still on. So I guess there's some kind of carryover. But yeah, but I also think though that humor is one of the great communication tools that God gives us.
Yeah.
There are times that humor can skid off the road, and there are certainly times that humor can be inappropriate. But the other thing about it is too, there are certain situations that Christians end up in that aren't funny unless they happen there.
Yeah.
I mean, you as a pastor, I as a pastor, how many? Do you have any idea how many funerals you've done?
Yep.
You do. You know how many you've done?
Almost 900.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I lost count. I don't think I've done 900.
Yeah.
But I will remember forever, standing at the head of a casket where you're supposed to stand, and the ground gave way underneath me.
And you fell underneath the casket?
And so I started to go down underneath the casket, and I was taking the artificial turf with me. Now again, so I scampered out. I didn't go down.
Yeah.
Well, after you get over the shock, though, that's wildly funny.
Yeah.
But that's not funny if it doesn't happen at a funeral.
Yeah.
Right? Now they walked away from the funeral remembering what happened that day.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what I said. The family will never remember what I said, but they will always remember that moment when the ground started to kind of slide away, and in the middle of me talking.
Yeah.
I had that sudden gulp, and you pray, you don't say something that's going to be inappropriate, but you're doing everything you can not to go down in that hole.
And not to laugh.
Well, I was laughing when I got out. I mean, I was laughing when I was done. I ended up on my backside, on my keister, with legs kind of dangling, kind of toward the opening.
Can I tell mine?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, when I went to my first church, which is a rural church, this is before, GPS, and I was asked to do a graveside, and I didn't have a GPS, and I'm not good on maps, and I'm trying to listen to the directions, and we're out in the country, and I'm driving, and it's getting time for that graveside, and I see a backhoe, and I see the people there, and I park the car, get out, straighten my coat, have my Bible with my notes, walk up, said, okay, walked over to the hole, and I did my short little graveside. I said, God bless you, and started to walk away, and I heard this guy say, I've been putting in septic tanks a long time, and that's the first time I've ever heard anything like that. So.
Well, it's one for the ages, right?
Hey, yeah.
Well, joy is a fruit of the Spirit, and it's not forbidden fruit.
Right, not bitter.
And I think the challenge for each of our listeners here, and we're going to take a break and come back after we try to peddle some merchandise here and sell a few things. But I think for our audience, especially is really to challenge yourself. Do you see the joy in life? Do you find the humor in life?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, there's an element or a dynamic to your faith that you're missing out on.
Right.
We're going to come back and talk about that a little bit more.
All right.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Chris, I was just doing my laundry, and look what I found.
Oh, my goodness, look at that. The Clash.
The Clash t-shirt.
I love that.
You know what makes it so special?
Why?
Well, because this is the Clash TV show. This is our logo. This came out of my laundry bucket. That means that these t-shirts are available for everybody to buy. And that means that when you need to do some shopping, that special gift, think about it.
Yep.
You've been invited to a wedding. You need to buy a wedding present for the bride and groom.
Wow.
Matching Clash t-shirts.
How awesome
Every
would that
home
be?
needs that. When they have a baby, what do you want to get the baby?
A onesie.
A onesie, a Clash onesie. You can get that as well.
Right.
If you're looking for that extra special gift for a loved one,
Right.
you can go to the Clash store and get a Clash journal. You can get Clash magnets. You can get Clash widgets and gadgets and keychains. All of that is available. All you have to do is visit the Clash store.
We live in a great day, Jeff.
We do. And perhaps the greatest store out there is the Clash store. So follow the QR code at the bottom of the screen. You can go to the Clash store and get stuff of your very own. It'll make us happy. It'll make the show even better. And you can put on your Clash gear while you watch every single episode of the Clash.
Absolutely.
3.
Jeff, do you remember the first Bible verse you memorized?
I do. I have sometimes trouble remembering the address of it. But it's John 11:35. Jesus wept. Now, when I was a kid, they were having a contest, and the goal was go home this week and come back and memorize the Bible verse. I'm a practical kid, right? I'm like, okay, what's the shortest verse I can find in the Bible? And sure enough, 2 words, Jesus wept. Fantastic, I'm on it. And so that was the first verse I ever memorized. And other people memorized John 3:16. I mean, and they were doing great stuff. But me, I just kept it simple. But I found out over time, though, that in those 2 words, I have discovered so much about Jesus and the way that he connects to us, the way he feels about us, the way he feels our pain, meets us at our point of need, his compassion and caring. It's really all wrapped up in those 2 words. And so for me, although it's silly, it's also the first verse I ever remember as a kid.
Hey, welcome back to The Clash. Hope you enjoyed our commercial, by the way. And, Jeff, we were talking about humor. Matter of fact, we were laughing during the break, too, that we had a lot of things to laugh about. But do you think that there is a possibility that the reason we don't laugh as much as we should in church is one of the reasons might be because we have too many Christian superstitions?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think that's legit. Now, most people probably don't call them Christian superstitions because we know that we probably ought not to have them just by nature. Right. So we would never call them that. But in essence, that's what they are. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we kind of lose sight of the fact that Jesus didn't die to make us boring. Yeah. He died to give us freedom, and that freedom gives us the ability to laugh. Yeah. And frees us from a lot of stuff. But when you say Christian superstition, what do you think about? I've got a few, but tell me what you're thinking of.
Well, I think that there's some churches out there that think if you don't do things exactly the way we do things in our church, then your church must be wrong. And so we have these things that are set in stone that become superstitions, that this is the way it's done, and there's no other way to do it. For instance, you ever been condemned because we don't have a Sunday night service?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. And that's one of those cases where a tradition or somebody's tradition becomes a superstition. Yeah. Right. That you're supposed to have it. Right. And if you don't, you're not doing. Well, I don't know if you had bad luck, but you're just not doing your job, right?
Oh yeah. My first church, we had Sunday night services. Second church, Sunday night services, and of course, Jeff, those are the least attended services there are Sunday night. Yeah. And I started asking the question, why do we have Sunday night service? Why do we do that? And I went to an event one time. They had a historian there, and I asked that question, and he gave me the answer to it. I said, why do we have Sunday night services? He said, back during the Industrial Revolution, when electricity started coming in, one of the first places to get electricity were churches. Oh, wow. And there was a pastor one night that was just up there working on a Sunday night, picking up papers, putting up hymnals and stuff, and the lights were on, and people started walking into the church because they wanted to see the lights. And he came up with this idea, man, this would be a great thing. Have a service on Sunday night, And in those days, the Sunday night service was the biggest service because, people were working and doing their chores on Sunday morning. They had animals and had to milk the cows and had to do all that kind of stuff. And their mornings were filled up, but they could come at nighttime. And then as electricity became more accessible, and our, culture changed, and we weren't as rural, community as we used to be. It reversed, and now the Sunday morning service is the biggest service. Mm-hmm. Sunday night isn't. So, but some people think it's got to be in the Bible somewhere.
Sure. Does that have Sunday night service?
Sunday night service.
Yeah. I'm more practical than that. I'm not good enough to do a Sunday night service. I don't have enough original ideas or thoughts to fill in Sunday morning and then come back on Sunday night with anything that's worth coming to hear. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is God doesn't speak to me on Sunday night. Yes.
Tell me another church superstition.
This is almost really does kind of cross the line of superstition. if someone sneezes.
God bless you.
Yeah. If you don't say God bless you, you're somehow doing something that's wrong. You know, I mean, is that in the Bible? You have to say God bless you in the Bible?
I've never even seen a sneeze in the Bible.
Not either.
I haven't seen one.
Well, how about this? How fearful are we as Christians sometimes of the number 666? So much so that if you book a hotel room and it's room 666, you don't want it because you know it's,
or 13.
It's like of the beast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we get very wigged out, even though that number has meaning biblically.
Right.
That has nothing to do with a hotel room or the last 3 digits of a telephone number or a bank account. You know, I mean, someone asked me one time if you had a phone number that you could choose. You know, I'd say, well, I want the last 3 digits to be 666. You know, it's easier to remember that way. You know, and they were just appalled. You're a Christian pastor. Why would you want that? I'm like, because everyone would talk about it. You know, I remember the number that way.
Most people would change their number, but you would keep it.
I would keep it. I think you kind of wear it as a, you know, not a badge of honor, but it's certainly not the mark of the beast either.
Yeah.
Not in that case. Not in that case.
You think there's any superstition around? Now, we're going to probably lose some people on this one because they'd say, "I can't believe you're even." Any superstitions dealing with the Lord's Supper?
Oh, yes. There is, and I mean, there's probably, you know, it probably would be a good episode one day for us to come back and do a real, you know, reverent look at the Lord's Supper, what it means, why we do it, how we do it. I mean, that's probably an episode down the road somewhere. But yeah, I mean, people have in mind when it needs to take place. Being a Baptist in my background, it was every 5th Sunday. So whenever the calendar would dictate it, you would have it.
Right.
But then the way that you do it, you know, who serves it, the way that the elements are passed out. And then, of course, then you get into the whole other piece of the, depending on your denomination, whether or not, you know, you're talking about what something becomes symbolic, but does that symbolic thing become real? And, you know, what is the holiness of that moment? I'm not minimizing that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of denominations out there, I think, that hold on to some traditions and beliefs that really does kind of cross that line into superstition because there's no biblical basis for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And to hold on to it and be that reverent about it. I mean, and again, my Baptist ability to blunder knows no bounds.
Yeah.
And so if I'm a guest in a church of another denomination, sometimes I will ask, give me the lay of the land here. Because I made the mistake one time of walking in front of some area that was designated with a candle that they kept part of the Lord's Supper elements in. Mm-hmm. And they said I was not allowed to walk in front of or block the body of Christ.
Oh, man.
Now, again, you know, while I don't agree with that, but that is their tradition that they were very serious about. And so, I mean, I had some parameters that were set up that particular day that, you know, for me, that's pretty tough.
Well, in my first church, we were supposed to do the Lord's Supper and things were running late. And it's like, why are we so late? Because our service is fixing to start. Well, George bought the wrong kind of grape, grape drink. He didn't buy Welch's. So we had to send him back. And it's like, wait a minute. It's just grape juice. Why does it? Well, it's got to be Welch's. We've always used Welch's grape juice, and he didn't get the right kind, so we had to send him back to get the right kind.
Well, that's tough. Here at the Church of 434, we've used Gatorade in the past because I always felt like electrolytes were good for you. And so I wanted to make sure that not only was the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Supper was not only meaningful, but it was nutritious and had some kind of,
Do they make great Gatorade?
Yeah. Now, it looks pretty puny when you put it in the little Lord's Supper cup. I mean, it's very almost, very see-through, and you're like, this is kind of watered down blood. Were they too cheap to buy the real stuff? Because we wouldn't buy the Welch's. It was too expensive.
How about when you were growing up as a boy? I don't know, did you have this when my mom started taking me to church, that suddenly you couldn't watch TV on Sunday, couldn't go fishing on Sunday, it wasn't okay to go over and play with my buddies on Sunday. Yeah. And, for kids, that gives you a bad look on Sunday. Do you have any of those?
Well, my parents, praise God, they would let me play on Sunday, and we didn't have quote unquote Sabbath rules. We went to church, and then it was whatever the day held, which was good. But you were in Texas the same time I was in seminary. When we got out there were blue laws out there still. Yeah.
Well, they were just ending the blue law whenever I went in 1985.
Okay, I may have gotten there before you though, because I was there in the middle of they still had the blue laws, but they were wrapping them up. They were starting to kind of take them off, because I remember that first Sunday being out in Fort Worth after church. And again, you're new, you don't know the area, so you go out and eat because you went to church. Because all seminary students had to go to church the first week, then they never went back.
Right.
But then we go out to eat, and after we went out to eat, then it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do? I mean, everything is closed. The mall was open, but you could only walk through it. Mm-hmm. And the only other thing that was available to do in town was a movie. Now the movie theaters were open.
Really?
But all the stores were shut down. Blue laws were in effect, and so nothing opened again until Monday morning. I mean, and I'm from Orlando, so that was a culture shock because we never had those here in Florida.
Yeah.
But again, it was the way they did it. And if you talk to someone who was a good Texan that had grown up in that environment, man, they held to those. They believe you to go home, you're going to take your nap, you're not going to do any work. Now, in fairness, they watch the Dallas Cowboys. But other than that, that's about all that could be accomplished on a Sunday.
I'll tell you another one in Texas. I was in church, and there was a big controversy, and I'm trying to, listen in on this, what the controversy was, and the controversy was mixed bathing.
Oh.
And I was like, mixed bathing? Good gracious alive.
Took me a minute to figure out what we were talking about there for a minute. Okay.
What have I gotten myself into? And then I found out they were talking about swimming.
Yeah. Guys and girls swimming together.
Yeah, boys and girls shouldn't swim. And of course, I'm from Florida. I grew up on the lake over in Auburndale, Florida, and we had Max Beach. And I was swimming with girls from the time that I could swim. And I didn't know what the big sin was, but evidently it was.
It was. And that filtered through. That wasn't just, that's just not a Texas thing. I mean, I did a camp up in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And there were rules about mixed bathing for the student ministry that was going on there and stuff like that. So they were like these big statewide camps. Right. And there was a block of time in the afternoon for the guys to swim and use the pool. And then they had time to clear the pool, empty the pool out. I don't know if they drained it, refilled it. But anyway, and then the girls would come and have their opportunity to block, or they flip-flopped it somehow or something. But yeah, that was a big deal. And one of the most troubling things that would happen out there is if some guy took a wild hair and jumped in the pool when the girls were in the pool.
Oh.
It's kind of
Did he get sent home?
No, but they kind of, they drug him out and they waterboarded him. No, they didn't do that either. But they, bad juju though, man. They threw him in the pool and it was horrible. So, I think sometimes we've allowed a lot of stuff to kind of invade our Christianity. And we've forgotten that in the essence of it all, Jesus came to bring us joy. He came to bring us freedom, and freedom from the law, which means that you can't do everything. But you can do those things that are good and wholesome. And I really think that sometimes laughter and having a sense of humor really is an essential quality for a Christian, because we have everything to be joyful about, but also brings quality to life.
Everything.
And then so, interesting. Again, gosh, I don't think I covered anything in our notes.
I don't think I did either.
But we'll come back probably another time and talk more about this kind of stuff. But hopefully you've had a good time and you've enjoyed it. And Chris, you got to get us out of here. We need to be done.
Well, I hope that this week you do a lot of laughing. Laugh every opportunity you get, because it's okay to be a Christian and have fun. Don't tap out.